A man had come to this country as an immigrant 30 years ago, and his son was home from a break at college, and he said to his dad, "Dad, you have really got to bring this store up to date. You've got to get computerized. Why are you still doing your payables and your receivables by hand? How would you ever know without a computer what your real profits are?" Well, the father listened patiently, and then he said, "Son, I came to this great country 30 years ago with only the shirt on my back. Your sister is an art instructor. Your brother is a doctor. You are soon to become a CPA. Your mother and I own our house. We own our car. We own this store. All of these things, minus the shirt on my back, are my profits." An uppity, arrogant son and a humble, grateful father. Our world does not applaud humility. In fact, our world seems to think that humility is a weakness. But God does see humility as a virtue. Not a false humility, but a true humility. A false humility results in things like self-hatred or feeling inferior to everybody else or being very low on self-esteem. That's false humility. True humility comes from the Latin word humus, H-U-M-U-S. That's where we get humility. And what does humus mean? The earth, the soil, the ground. Humility means walking with my feet firmly on the ground and knowing who I truly am before God and acting accordingly. Humility is living truthfulness, and that's a virtue. The scriptures speak to us today about humility. The first reading from the Old Testament, the book of Sirach, has this line: "Children, conduct your affairs with humility, and you will be loved more than a giver of gifts." And isn't that true? When we're with someone who is humble, they're wonderful people to be around. In the gospel, Jesus teaches us about humility, talks about a wedding banquet, and those who would seek the place of honor, those who would seek the lowest place and be invited to come higher. And Jesus says to us, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. Humility is knowing who I am truly before God and then acting accordingly. Every Sunday Mass we have a gift procession, an offertory procession, and so many of you participate in that, bringing forward the bread and the wine and water that will be consecrated during this Mass, that will be changed from bread and wine into the very body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. You bring those gifts forward in the gift procession. I receive them right here. And then I carry those gifts of bread and wine and water to the altar. When I pour the water and the wine into the chalice to prepare it, there's a little prayer that I pray as the priest quietly, not because it's any secret, but it's just that we pray that prayer very quietly. But let me tell you what that means. The wine represents the divinity of Jesus Christ. The water represents our humanity. I pour a couple of drops of water into the wine in the chalice being prepared, and this is the prayer. By the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. We hear about the humility of God, who sent his divine Son, Jesus, to become human like us in all things except sin. Jesus, the Son of God, becomes a man. Why? He humbled himself to share in our humanity so that we could share in his divinity, so that we could become like Jesus. But all of that in an act of humility. By the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. There's a story that comes to us many, many years ago from Russia. It's about a scholar, and it's about a monk who lived all by himself, who lived as a hermit. And the scholar one day was walking along the seashore. And just a bit offshore was a small island, and that's where the monk lived alone. And as the scholar was walking along that waterside, he heard the monk singing his prayers. Now, you would think that would make the scholar very happy and inspired, but it didn't. It irritated him. And he said to himself, that monk, he doesn't know what he's doing. That isn't the right tune. He's making mistakes. And the words, he's mispronouncing. So the scholar rented a rowboat and goes out to this little island and encounters the monk. And the monk welcomes the scholar. And the scholar says, but you're doing it all wrong. Those aren't the right notes. That isn't the way to pronounce those words of the prayer. Let me teach you. And the monk graciously accepted the teaching of the scholar. The scholar got back into his rowboat, starts making it back to the shore, when all of a sudden he hears a splash. And he looks, and here comes the monk, walking on top of the water, saying, please come back, I don't think I got it quite right. Would you do that again? And what do we have? An uppity, arrogant scholar and a humble, grateful monk. What is humility? It's knowing who I am as I stand before God and acting accordingly. Acting like Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who humbled himself to share in our humanity so that we could share in his divinity. And Jesus promises everyone a place at his banquet table in the kingdom of heaven. Everyone who will follow in his footsteps, who will walk humbly with our God.